Let's be honest, every single day we are just flooded with information. And so much of it is noise, a lot of it contradicts itself, and pretty much all of it is trying to convince us of something. So today, we're going to learn a new skill. Think of it as a superpower for cutting through all that noise so you can find the real point in absolutely anything you read.
So, picture this. You're scrolling through your feed and you see a headline like this one. It's bold, it sounds official. You probably think, oh, okay, cool, the new policy is working. Seems simple enough, right?
But then, literally moments later, you see this. It's about the exact same policy, but it's a completely opposite take. All that clarity you had, poof, it's gone. Now you're wondering, wait, is it a success or a total disaster? And to top it all off, you see this one, which basically confirms that, yeah, everyone is just as confused as you are. It's like being caught in an information whirlwind, and it's honestly exhausting trying to figure out what's actually going on.
So, how in the world do you find the real point in all of this? Well, the secret isn't about picking a side. It's about learning to see the structure underneath all the noise. And that's exactly what we're going to do right now. The very first thing you've got to realize is that you are surrounded by arguments all day, every day. Seriously, anytime someone is trying to persuade you of something, a news article, an ad, a post online, they're making an argument. Now, I know when you hear the word argument, you probably think of a fight, right? A heated disagreement. But in the world of logic and critical thinking, it means something way more specific. And getting this distinction is the first crucial step. See, a real argument isn't a fight. It's a structure. It's made up of building blocks, which we call premises. And they're all there to hold up one main idea, the conclusion. It's all about giving reasons, not just shouting your opinion. Let's look at this side by side. On the left, you just have a disagreement, two people with opposite views. That's it. But on the right, you have an argument. It gives you a reason, a premise, like rising tuition costs make college less accessible. And that leads to a conclusion. So we must expand scholarships. It doesn't just tell you what to believe. It tells you why you should believe it. Okay, so since every persuasive article or post has an argument hidden inside, our job as critical readers is to find its main point. We're going to call this the target, and learning how to spot that target is the whole game. The target, or the conclusion, same thing, is the single most important sentence in the entire piece. It is the bullseye. It's the one thing the writer wants to leave you believing. So before you analyze anything else, your number one job is always to find it. But here's the thing, not all main points are created equal. A really strong, effective argument is always built around a very specific kind of statement, one that's super clear and that you can actually dig into and examine. Just check out the difference here. On the left, birth control is important. I mean, okay, that's an opinion, but it's kind of fuzzy. It's hard to prove or disprove. But look at the one on the right. That is a sharp target. It's precise, right? It names a group, a time frame, and a very specific outcome. It's a claim you can actually test with real-world evidence. So here are the key ingredients. A sharp target is 1. Specific. It's not some big general idea. 2. It's debatable. This means it's not just a plain fact, like the sky is blue. It's something people could reasonably disagree on. And 3, most importantly, it's testable. You can actually go out and find evidence, polls, data, examples to see if the claim holds water. All right, enough theory, let's put this into practice. We're going to take a real argument from a news opinion piece and dissect it, piece by piece, to see exactly how this works in the wild. So you're scrolling and you see an article with this headline. Now that you know what to look for, your argument detector should be going off. You can probably guess that the author's main point, their target, is hiding right there, in plain sight. And sure enough, after reading the article, you can pull out the author's full target statement. See how it's even a little more specific than the headline? This right here is the bullseye. The entire article is built just to support this one idea. And notice, it fits our checklist. It's specific, it's definitely debatable, and you could test it with polling and election results. So once you've found that target, everything else in the article just snaps into place. You start to see that it's not just a random collection of facts, it's a carefully built support structure. The author uses premises, like polling data, examples of other politicians, and claims about cause and effect, all as pillars to hold up that one single target. And that's it. By learning to see the argument and find its target, you've fundamentally changed how you read. You're no longer just a passive consumer of information. You're an active analyst. This is a genuine superpower for navigating the world we live in today.
Now, if you only remember one thing from all of this, please make it this right here. The topic is just what the article is about. The target is what the author wants you to believe about that topic. They are not the same, and mixing them up is the #1 trap people fall into. So from this day forward, here's the ultimate test. After you read anything that's trying to be persuasive, stop and ask yourself this one question. If I had to boil this down to the author's single most important point, what would that one sentence be? It forces you to find the real heart of the argument. And this is really what it's all about. The goal here isn't to agree with every argument you come across. The goal is clarity. Because once you can clearly see the structure of what someone is trying to convince you of, well, that's when you have all the power. You can evaluate it on your own terms. You don't have to agree with an argument. You just have to see it. We're drowning in opinions, right? Everywhere you look, someone's trying to convince you of something. So how do you find the actual logic buried under all that persuasion? Well, that's exactly what we're going to do today. We are going to learn how to take any opinion piece and reveal the solid, logical argument at its very core. Let's get into it. So here's our game plan. First up, we'll nail down the crucial difference between an argument and an opinion. Then I'll show you a classic tool straight from the Philosopher's Toolkit. After that, we'll walk through 4 simple steps to make it your own, and then we'll put it to the test with a real-world article. We'll also cover the right mindset for using this tool fairly, and by the end, you'll have a brand new way to think critically. All right, let's dive right in. Arguments versus opinions. You know how it is. You're scrolling online, reading the news, and you're just hit with this wall of persuasive writing. All of it is designed to get a reaction, to make you feel a certain way. But what we're interested in is how it's trying to make you think. And that brings us to the big question, doesn't it? When you're reading an article that's packed with emotional stories and really powerful language, how in the world do you slice through all of that to find the logical core? How do you separate the signal from the noise? And really, it all comes down to this difference. On one hand, you've got the opinion statement. It's often messy, right? It's a jumble of feelings and persuasive tricks. But on the other hand, you have the building block of an argument, a premise. And a premise is clean. It's just a simple, factual, neutral statement. Our whole job is to become translators, to turn that emotional opinion into a clear, logical set of premises. Okay, so how do we actually do that translation? Sounds kind of complicated, right? Well, it's not, because philosophers have already built the perfect tool for us. It's designed to do one thing and one thing only, to show you the logical bones holding up any claim, no matter how much fluff is piled on top. And this amazing tool is called standard form. You gotta love the term philosopher's blueprint, because that is exactly what it is. It's a method for neatly laying out an argument piece by piece with these numbered statements called premises, all leading to one final point, the conclusion. It literally makes the entire structure of the reasoning visual. So let's build one from scratch. Every argument has to start somewhere with a reason, right? So we label our first reason P1. That's for premise 1. It's just a simple statement that's going to help support our final point. Then you just add another reason, P2 for premise 2. And you could keep going, P3, P4, whatever it takes. Each one is like another brick you're laying in the foundation of the argument. And once all your bricks, all your premises are in place, they should logically point to one single thing, the conclusion, which we just label with a C. And here's the cool part, this is the real test. If you agree that all the premises are true, you pretty much have to accept the conclusion. The logic just works. And that right there is why this is so powerful. What you're doing is creating the logical skeleton of an article. You're stripping away all the persuasive fat, the personal stories, the emotional language, all of it, and you're left with just the bare bones of the argument. It's pure clarity. Okay, that's the what. Now for the how. This is the really practical part. I'm going to give you a super simple 4-step process you can use on any opinion piece to turn it into a clear, standard form argument. Okay, step 1 is easy. Just go through the article and highlight every sentence that feels like a reason for the main point. Don't overthink it, just highlight. Then step 2, eliminate the fluff. This is the fun part. You get to slash all the background info, the personal stories, anything that isn't a core reason.
Step 3, rewrite what's left in your own words, but make it super neutral and simple. Turn them into those clean statements we talked about. And finally, step 4, arrange them in an order that makes sense, creating a logical chain that leads right to the conclusion. Theory is one thing, but seeing this in action is where it really clicks. So let's take everything we've just learned and apply it to a real-world example to see this transformation happen.
So we're going to look at a CNN opinion piece. And just a reminder, our job here is not to agree or disagree with this piece. Not at all. We're just putting on our detective hats to uncover the logical structure the author built. Okay, so after running that article through our 4-step process, this is the logical skeleton that emerges. Look how clean this is. P1 and P2 set up this tension between public opinion and party policy. Then, P3 gives us a general political rule about what happens in that kind of situation. And P4 adds some very recent, specific evidence to back it all up. You see how they all work together? They lead you almost inevitably to that conclusion, C. And that is the big reveal. The persuasive tone from the original article? Gone. The emotional pull? Vanished. All that's left is the core logic, laid out for you to inspect. Now you can start the real analysis. Are these premises actually true? Does the logic hold up? You can finally see the argument clearly enough to evaluate it. Okay, before you get all excited and start deconstructing everything you read, there is one really important rule of the road we need to talk about. It's about being fair, and it's what makes this a powerful analytical tool instead of just a cheap way to attack people's ideas. It's called the principle of charity. And it's simple. When you're rebuilding someone's argument, your goal is to make it the strongest, most convincing version you possibly can. You're not looking for weak spots to exploit. You're not trying to build a straw man that's easy to knock down. You are trying to genuinely understand the best possible version of their reasoning. Think of yourself as a map maker, not a soldier. Your goal is accuracy, not advocacy. You are just mapping their argument, not attacking it. Real critical thinking always starts with understanding, and this is how you get there. So, how can you tell if the map you've made is any good? Just run it through this quick 3-question quality check. First, do all my premises actually support the conclusion? Be honest. Second, is there any fluff left? Any premises that are repetitive or just not needed? And third, and this is the big one, could a stranger read only your standard form and totally get the author's core argument? If the answer is yes, you've nailed it. Okay, let's zoom out for a second. What did we just do here? This isn't just some dusty old academic exercise. You've genuinely learned a new way to interact with the world of information. Seriously, you now have a powerful tool, kind of like a new superpower for reading. It lets you slice right through all the noise, all the emotional manipulation, and see the logical blueprint hidden inside any argument. That is a total game changer. So, I'm going to leave you with a challenge. The very next time you read something, an article, a post, anything that gets a strong emotional reaction out of you, whether it's anger or excitement, I want you to stop, take a breath, and try to map it out. Find its logical skeleton. So, my question to you is, what argument are you going to deconstruct first? So you've been there, right? Staring at an article for class, trying to figure out what the argument really is. It can be tough, but what if I told you there's one super common mistake that trips up almost everyone? It's this subtle but absolutely crucial difference between what an author leaves out and what you think they should have put in. We're going to clear that up right here, right now. You're confusing omissions with improvements. Ouch. Has a professor ever hit you with that one on a paper? It stings a little, doesn't it? But here's the thing. It's not really a knock on your thinking. It's actually a signpost, pointing you toward a much, much deeper and more powerful way to analyze things. So what is the real difference? I'm telling you, nailing this is the key. It's what separates a good analysis from a great one. And honestly, it just makes you a sharper, more critical thinker in general. Let's make this crystal clear. All right, let's start with omissions. I want you to think of yourself as a detective, but instead of searching for clues, your first job is to filter out all the noise. An omission is something you intentionally leave on the cutting room floor because it isn't part of the core argument. Okay, so here's the official definition. An omission is something that was totally in the original article, but you didn't include it when you laid out the argument in standard form. Why? Because it's not part of the bare bones logical structure. It's the flavorful language, the emotional appeals, the extra stories. It's not a flaw, it's just the stuff you have to peel away to see the argument's skeleton. And this is basically how that process looks. You start with the original article, right? Which is often kind of messy and complicated. Your job is to act like a filter, stripping out all the rhetoric, the vivid examples, the emotional language. And what comes out the other side? That's your clean, pure, standard form argument. Everything you filtered out in the middle, yep, those are the omissions. Let's get concrete with some examples from that CNN article about contraception. When the author talks about freedom, that's an omission. It's a powerful value, for sure, but it's not a logical premise. Calling opponents out of touch, that's pure rhetoric, designed to sway your feelings, not your reason. And bringing up Trump or Project 2025, those are just illustrations, examples to make a point, but they aren't logically required for the conclusion. All classic omissions. Okay, now let's flip the coin. Let's talk about improvements. If omissions are all about what you exclude from the article, improvements are all about what you bring to the table. This is where your own brain power really shines. An improvement is an idea that comes 100% from you, the analyst. It's when you read the argument and think, you know what would have made this stronger if the author had included some polling data? Or maybe they really should have defined this key term more clearly. See? That's your contribution. That's an improvement. Okay, if you only remember one thing from all this, make it this sentence right here. Omissions come from the article. Improvements come from you. Burn that into your brain. It's the simplest, fastest way to keep these two powerful analytical tools straight. All right, so why are we geeking out about this so much? Why is it such a big deal? Because getting this right isn't just a party trick for logic class. It's fundamental to any strong analysis. It's exactly what your instructors are looking for. Here it is, side by side. This is the aha moment. Identifying omissions is about describing the argument structure, showing what you left out to reveal its core. Suggesting improvements is about evaluating that argument, showing how it could be stronger. One is description, the other is evaluation. Totally different jobs. And here's how this literally translates to your grade. When you correctly point out omissions, you're proving you get logical structure. You can see the blueprint of the argument. That's a huge skill. But when you suggest smart improvements, you're showing off your critical thinking. You're showing you can spot the weak points in that blueprint. You need both, but they are two very different skills. Now, the order you do this in is absolutely critical. You have to follow the steps. You can't just jump to suggesting improvements before you've even figured out what the core argument is. That's why you have to identify the omissions first. You got to isolate the argument's skeleton before you can poke at it to see how strong it is. Getting this sequence right is everything. Okay, so once you've nailed separating the structure from all the noise, you can sharpen your analysis even more. Now it's time to put the author's actual words under the microscope and take it to the next level. A truly sharp analyst, after spotting the omissions, starts hunting for vague terms. What does the author really mean by restricting contraception? Like, what does that look like? What actually counts as a losing strategy? These phrases could mean different things to different people, and pointing that out shows you understand that the meaning of words themselves is a huge part of any argument. So, there you have it. You've separated the author's writing from their actual reasoning. You've got the argument's bare bones laid out on the table, and that leads to the final and most fascinating question of all. How strong is that skeleton? Is it solid? Is it persuasive? And that, my friends, is the gateway to talking about fallacies and the real power of a good argument. Every single day, every day, you're just bombarded with arguments, right? From news headlines and ads to just chatting with your friends, it feels like everyone is trying to persuade you of something. So in this explainer, we're going to build a toolkit to help you judge the strength of any argument that comes your way. Let's get into it. So how do you actually do it? How can you tell the difference between an argument that's solid as a rock and one that's, basically a house of cards ready to fall over the second you touch it? That's the big question we're tackling today, because knowing the answer is really your best defense against getting swayed by bad logic. To get to the bottom of this, we've got to realize that every argument is trying to be persuasive. But, and this is key, judging it isn't about how it makes you feel. It's about a logical, almost surgical assessment. We're going to move past those gut reactions and learn how to take these arguments apart with some real precision. Okay, so picture this. A strong argument is like a really well-built structure.
It can't just be thrown together, right? It needs a solid foundation. And that foundation, it turns out, rests on three essential pillars that give it all its strength and balance. If even one of them is weak, well, the whole thing starts to wobble.
So what are these three pillars? Well, first up, we've got relevant evidence. Like, are the facts even true? And do they actually relate to the point being made? Second is valid logic. Do all the pieces actually connect to the conclusion in a way that makes sense? And number three is crystal clarity. Is the language being used precise and consistent, or is it kind of vague and shifty?
And yeah, this is the whole deal right here. It's like a three-legged stool, you know? You can have amazing evidence, but if your logic is flawed, the argument fails. You can have perfect logic, but if your language is super confusing, your point just gets lost. All three pillars have to be strong for an argument to really hold up.
Let's take a look at that clarity pillar in action, because it's a big one. An argument that just says things might get restricted, what does that even mean? It's so vague you can't even argue with it. It's weak. But an argument that defines exactly what restriction means and backs it up with specific data, now that's a strong argument. That's something you can actually sink your teeth into.
Now, when that logic pillar gets wobbly, it's usually because of something called a fallacy. And don't worry, that word sounds way more academic than it is. A fallacy is basically just a common mistake in thinking, a reasoning error. They're so tricky because they often appeal to our emotions, which can make them feel persuasive even when they're totally unsound. Let's look at a couple of the most common ones.
All right, first one up, the hasty generalization. Oh man, you see this one everywhere. This is what happens when someone takes one tiny little piece of evidence, maybe just one personal story, and then boom, they blow it up into this massive sweeping conclusion about everything.
I mean, here's a perfect example. Look, maybe that one friend had a terrible time, and that's totally valid for them. But to say the entire city is awful based on that one experience, that's a huge leap in logic, right? It's a classic hasty generalization, and it makes the whole argument super weak.
All right, next up we've got the appeal to popularity. You might know it as the bandwagon fallacy. This is the classic, well, everyone's doing it argument. The logic here is pretty sneaky. It's basically saying, hey, if tons of people believe it, it must be true. But, a quick look at history shows us tons of popular ideas that turned out to be completely wrong.
And yep, here's a classic example of it out in the wild. Just because everyone's buying those sneakers, does that really mean they're the best? Or does it just mean they have a killer marketing team? Arguing that something is good because it's popular is a total shortcut. It dodges the need to provide any real evidence. Okay, and this is a really important point, so listen up. Just because you spot a fallacy doesn't automatically mean the conclusion is wrong. Those popular sneakers, they might actually be the best. But the fallacy means the reasoning, the argument used to get there, is weak. It's a huge red flag that the support structure is shaky. All right, so we've covered the pillars, we've seen a couple of common logic traps. Now, let's pull it all together. Let's build a simple, practical tool you can use anytime for literally any argument you come across. We'll call it the 4-point test. Think of this as your new secret weapon, right? A pocket-sized argument detector. It's a super quick mental checklist you can run through to really pressure test the logic of any claim, whether you're reading an article, watching the news, or just in a debate with a friend. So here it is, just 4 simple questions. The first 3 check our pillars. Evidence, are the facts solid and do they even matter to the point? Logic, do the pieces actually connect properly? Clarity, is the language specific and clear? And then there's a really important 4th one. Fairness. Does the argument actually consider other viewpoints, or is it just a one-sided story? The more times you can say yes to these questions, the more solid the argument is. And that's the thing. When an argument can pass this test, it just feels stable. It's not that house of cards we talked about that collapses if you breathe on it. No, it's a brick house. You can push on it, you can poke at it, and it's not going anywhere. That is the real sign of a persuasive argument. So why does all this matter so much? I mean, really? This is way more than just winning an argument online or getting a good grade on a paper. Learning how to evaluate arguments is one of the most fundamental skills for just navigating the modern world. At its core, it's about learning to think for yourself. What we've been talking about here is building a skill for life. It's about having a toolkit that lets you think clearly, read between the lines, and really, truly form your own informed opinions, instead of just borrowing them from someone else. It's basically a toolkit for intellectual freedom. And I guess I want to leave you with this final idea. The point of all this isn't just to figure out what to believe. It's about understanding the why behind those beliefs. It's about knowing why you believe what you do. And knowing that why, man, that is a superpower that will stay with you forever.
Let's talk about a really common mental trap. A glitch in our thinking that trips us all up, from the casino floor to, well, just our everyday decisions. It's called the gambler's fallacy, and I'm willing to bet you've fallen for it at least once without even realizing it.
Okay, picture this. You're at a roulette table in Vegas. The vibe is electric, you hear the chips clattering, and the person next to you says this with just absolute, unshakable confidence. And it sounds so logical, right? It just feels right. But is it?
And this is why they're so sure. 5 straight blacks. Our brains just scream that something's wrong here, that this streak is unnatural. It feels like there's some kind of cosmic balancing act that's about to happen, that the universe, or at least the wheel, owes us a red. It's time for the pattern to break. But hang on. Let's pause and really break that feeling down, because this right here is exactly where our intuition leads us completely astray. And it all comes down to one really crucial question.
So, what do you think? After 5 blacks, is red really more likely to come up on the next spin? Does that little white ball somehow remember where it landed before and think, you know what? I should probably go somewhere else to even things out?
Here's exactly where the logic just falls apart. Step 1. The premise, yeah, that's true. Black came up 5 times. And the conclusion seems like it should follow. But the entire thing is built on this shaky, hidden assumption that random outcomes have to even out in the short term. And that's the trap.
And here is the cold, hard, mathematical truth. On a standard American roulette wheel, the chance of hitting red is always, and I mean always, about 47%. It doesn't matter if black came up 5 times, or 100 times, or 1,000 times before. Each spin is a totally fresh, completely independent event. The wheel just has no memory.
So, this really powerful but totally mistaken belief, well, it has a name. It's a very well-documented cognitive bias, and here's what it's officially called. And there you have it. It's believing a coin is due for heads after a string of tails, or that the wheel is due for red. You see, our brains are basically pattern-matching machines. They're wired to find cause and effect. It's a survival trait. But when that programming runs up against true randomness, it backfires. We try to force order where there's absolutely none. Now, you might be thinking, okay, I get it for roulette, but I'm not a gambler. But the thing is, this fallacy creeps into so many other areas of our lives, and a lot of the time, we don't even realize it's happening. Sound familiar at all? Yeah, we see it in investing, right? Someone thinks a stock that's been down for days is just bound to rebound. Or in sports, when a commentator says a player who's missed 5 shots is due for a hit. Heck, we've all done it with the weather, thinking a week of sun must mean rain is coming. It is the exact same faulty logic, just dressed up in a different outfit.
So, the big question is, how do we fight this? How can we spot this little glitch in our own thinking and start making better, clearer decisions? Well, it actually comes down to a really simple mental check.
Here's the tool to put in your mental toolkit. The next time you feel like something is due to happen, just stop. Stop and ask yourself, are these events truly independent? Does a stock dropping yesterday cause it to rise today? Nope. Does a player missing a shot somehow magically cause the next one to go in? Of course not. If the events aren't connected, then you know you're dealing with randomness, which has no memory. And honestly, that's the real takeaway here. It's a challenge for all of us to think about, in your work, in your finances, even in your tiny daily predictions. Where are you letting the memory of the past predict a future that's completely random? Just being able to spot the fallacy is the first and most important step to thinking a whole lot more clearly.